Hello friends, welcome to Current Jots. This is Manifest IAS. Today we'll be taking up the topic tax reforms in India and what are the recent changes and what are the recent announcements by the Finance Ministry and what are the recent changes or announcements made by the PM itself. So coming to the history of tax reforms, first of all, tax reforms as an endeavor started from the year 1971 and also 1977. So as we can see from the slide, the Tax Reform Committee established in 71 and 77 for the first time. Thereafter, these were the first efforts towards comprehensive tax reforms in India. But the problem was these reforms were largely ad hoc. They were more of prescriptive in nature. That is, they were not in the sense planned. It was more of reaction to what was the popular demand from industry, what was the reaction from demand from individuals, etc. Moreover, these reforms were not meaningful enough. That's why the reforms carried out during reports of 71 and 77 led to a fiscal and economic imbalance, what we say is a economic crisis or a planned holiday in 91-92. So we had a FRBM crisis, you can say, that is fiscal responsibility crisis, where tax revenue was not enough to cover the shortfalls of expenditure in India. So this led to a comprehensive tax reform committee established in 1991, which focused on both direct and indirect taxes. Overall, direct and indirect taxes, when we talk about taxes altogether, which is direct plus indirect, we can also say it is a structural reform because the tax system somewhere has a bearing on the whole doing business environment, ease of living, etc. So somewhere as part of a broader LPG, which is liberalization, privatization and globalization, we have direct and indirect tax reform as part of our structural reform measures. Now, what is it all about? First of all, it is about broadening the base. Broadening the base is nothing but number of taxpayers, that we need more and more people in the tax net. So that is about broadening of the tax net. Broadening means more and more people should be paying the tax. Next is about marginal tax rate. Marginal tax rate is that when your income goes up, what is the additional tax liability of a company or an individual, so that when you get rich, you should not shy away from paying taxes. You should not shy away from paying taxes or adjust or indulge in what we say tax avoidance, tax evasion, etc. So that is what led to the third point, which is reducing the tax rate itself. So that's why we have something called tax slabs, and we go for slab rationalization. We went for rationalization of the tax slabs in India. That is what we say, reducing the rate differentiation or the slabs. So now we have 10% or 5%, 20%, 30%. Then we have some surcharge, we have some cess. Then lastly, we have administrative measures such as introduction of Saral form, which was simply a one-page form for filing your taxes. Then we have e-assessment. Then we have e-filing. So there were a lot of administrative changes introduced, such as administration and more enforcement measures, such as your SFIO, which is Serious Frauds Investigation Office, to check tax evasion, tax avoidance. Then we had many recent issues such as GAR, GST, VAT, etc. Now, what are the main recommendations or what are the features or principles of Tax Reforms Committee 1991? First of all, it was about minimizing exemptions and concessions, because we have a concept called SEZs, and same way we have a concept called MAT and AMT, which is what? Minimum alternate tax and alternate minimum tax. So this is basically reducing the role of exemption in terms of tax revenue. This is also what we call tax foregone. That is, or even in pre, you might get a question that what is tax revenue and what is tax foregone? That is the amount of money you could not collect, or what is the technical definition? Tax expenditure. So in prelims, if they ask you what is tax expenditure, that is nothing but the amount of money the government could not collect because of various exemptions and concessions extended to industry. Then it was about simplification of laws and procedures. As we discussed, it was about simplification, like one-page form, e-assessment, e-filing. So these are all measures towards simplification of the tax system itself. Then it was about proper information database, such as through PAN card, through your Aadhaar card, what we today call common KYC standards or know your customer standards. Then moreover, it was about computerization. It was about computerization of your tax system. It was about gathering the information, quoting PAN in your bank, quoting PAN with reference to high value transactions. Then lastly, it was about modernizing the whole administrative setup, modernizing the whole efficient machinery of your tax system, taking some reforms in CBDT, indirect tax department, VAT department, state level reforms, etc. Then what were the main recommendations? The first was that value-added tax should replace your sales tax. And gradually we moved towards goods and service tax. As we all know, that first it was sales tax, then we moved to value-added tax. Now gradually we are shifting or trying to make GST or goods and services tax more efficient. What was the principle based on? The main principle was reduction in tax. So as we know, we have a concept called Laffer curve. Laffer curve, where we have tax rates and tax revenue. So we were using somewhere Laffer curve to make effect of value-added tax, reduction in tax rates, etc. So UPSC prelims, many times they have asked what is the principle behind Laffer curve, what are the principles of tax rate, tax revenue, when is tax revenue high, when is tax revenue low, what do you mean by avoidance, what do you mean by what we say tax avoidance, tax evasion, then what is buoyancy of tax? See, buoyancy simply means here that when tax rate goes down, your revenue is actually increasing. So buoyancy is there, tax expenditure is there. So those are related concepts which you have come across in your static portions. Now coming to current affairs, what are the important implications? What are the important current events regarding the tax administration, tax collection, tax efficiency, etc.? First of all, a big reform in the budget talked about making India a manufacturing hub. So how do we achieve that dream of Make in India? How do we attract various companies to India? How do we attract more FDI? So for that, we have to be competitive vis-a-vis our peers such as Vietnam, Brazil, USA in terms of corporate taxes. So blanket budget announcement was announced where 25% the corporate tax was reduced from roughly effective rate of 33% to 25% for majority of the companies. Majority means that those companies with a turnover of less than 400 crores. So it was estimated at that time that it will affect 99% of the companies in India. 99%. Same way the surcharge was decreased for individuals so that more and more people, for example, we know that various HNIs or what we call high net worth individuals, probably they register themselves as UK citizens or Singapore citizens. Why is that? Because they are subject to more surcharge in India. So we want more Indians or more HNIs to stay in India. And also to check evasion and to check privilege, what we did was we made PAN and Aadhaar as interchangeable to make it more identifiable, to make it a common KYC or know your customer. So this was a big step forward where PAN and Aadhaar card is interchangeable. Then lastly, to make it easier, see, we discussed that 91 reforms was also about making tax administration easy and also more facilitative. So pre-filling of IT returns will gradually make way for you filing your returns yourself. You will not need expert advice. You will not need your chartered accountant or a trained professional to file your taxes for you. Because the pre-filling means that whatever your tax liability is, it will be pre-decided, it will be pre-filled in your form. And if you have a dispute, you can always change it. You can always challenge it. That's where we come to automation. So under automation itself, we come to faceless assessment, faceless appeal, taxpayer charter, which will be taken care of in the following slides. For example, faceless assessment and faceless appeal is about minimizing the interface between the taxpayer and the human being there as your officer, because that paves the way for discretion. Now, this discretion is where the aspects of corruption, manipulation, etc. step in. So if we make everything automated or so-called in income tax terms, self-populated data, that is, the data will fall automatically in terms of your KYC, which is linked to your PAN and Aadhaar. So this will minimize the interface between the tax department and the taxpayer, and everything will be clear, honest. In other words, can we say it is about SMART principle? SMART principle is nothing but simple, managerial, accountable, reliable, and transparent. So in this line, again for transparency, reliability, accountability, manageability, we have issues like faceless assessment, faceless appeal, taxpayer charter, and also in the budget, we gave some concessions for boosting housing and electric vehicle sector. Same way, these reforms are aimed at what? It was aimed at ease of simplification, ease of doing business, ease of living, easy for startups to come to India and raise money. It was about facilitation of international financial center. It was also about removal of STT or securities transaction tax. So this made it easier for FIIs to invest in India. Because what was happening is, when we come to the next slide, we'll come to know. For example, reduction in, now recently again, as part of the budget, now after that, we all know we got stuck with the coronavirus crisis. So it was a big impact for the economy. Now we have for the first time in 40 years, we are facing such a negative growth rate. We are facing almost a depression kind of scenario. So Atmanirbhar package was announced by the government, through which various other changes were announced. So probably this year, Atmanirbhar package will be more important than your survey and budget, because the numbers announced by the budget and survey will no longer be sacrosanct for this year. So therefore, extending the corporate tax reduction, that is 25%, to all companies was necessitated to boost investment, to boost employment. Again, new investment measures were announced to attract domestic companies, such as reduced rate to 15% or reduced rate to 22% if you want to take the incentive of MAT. Also, the rate of MAT, that is what we discussed, minimum alternate tax, was reduced. Also, exemption to income tax was announced for various individuals, that too at a personal level and also to a FIS. Now, when we come to dividend distribution tax, the issue was that when we paid dividend distribution tax, it was like double taxation for individuals, because when you are paying dividend distribution tax, you are paying taxes on your earnings from the stock market. Again, you are subject to taxation at a personal level. So this was hurting us, because FIIs will have to pay tax in their country and also pay tax on the dividend received from the shareholders. So somewhere this was putting us in a place where we were uncompetitive with respect to our peers, such as other countries in BRICS or other countries in ASEAN region or the Middle East, etc. So therefore, DDT abolition was a big step in facilitating more investment, both in terms of FDI and FII in India. Next, we wanted to clean the previous mistakes. We want to come out of litigation, because the tax department itself is the biggest litigator in India. We have a lot of disputes. We have a lot of money stuck in disputes with various bodies, various companies, various departments, etc. So a new scheme called Vivad Se Vishwas scheme was announced for direct and indirect taxes, where we provided one-time resolution and getting over the litigation of various departments, at the same time giving a window to facilitate ease of doing business and ease of living. So Vivad Se Vishwas scheme was about clearing the slate or clearing the previous liabilities in terms of indirect taxes, especially excise, VAT, etc. And also we want to encourage digital payments. So there was adequate promotion of digital payments, promotion of TDS and TCS simplification, etc. Then coming to what are the recent changes like faceless assessment, faceless appeal, taxpayer charter. So this is in line with what we call transparent taxation and honoring the honest. So this is one of the latest measures announced by the PM itself. So what is this all about? First of all, the system is based on policy-driven governance. That is, that the governance should have a minimum interface. There should be minimum government, maximum governance. So it is about the policy. It is about the automation of data, use of big data, artificial intelligence, e-assessment, e-filing, know your customer base. So it is about policy-driven governance. And also somewhere the tax department will believe that you're an honest person. We'll have faith in Indians. We'll have faith. The tax department will encourage development of faith in the individuals. So there'll be less what we call mistrust between the tax department. There'll be less litigation. The department will not feel that you're always cheating them. So they have to believe that you are a good individual. So therefore, we see in assessment and in appeals, we are seeing that randomly few cases are selected for e-assessment. That is, the tax department will generally strive for transparency, honesty, use of technology, and also efficient use of bureaucracy in terms of e-assessment, e-filing, where everything is done online. So what is e-assessment and e-filing? Where we have a so-called DIN number, that is document identification number, through which you track your file, you track everything, and that will enable you to track your grievance, to simply have a simple, managerial, accountable, reliable, and transparent system of tax. So taxpayer is honest. Then the taxpayer charter also talks about the same things. It talks about taxpayer as an honest person. It talks about complete and accurate information, that too online, through transparency like docket information system. The portal of tax department has been revamped to enable proper information of TDS paid, TCS, your salaries, your wages, your whatever income tax you have paid, what are the details regarding that, what are the filing date, what are the grievance redressal regarding that. It has been linked to your PAN, Aadhaar card, your mobile number. In other words, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile have been built upon. Then it's about confidentiality between the tax department and the taxpayer. So one should not be unnecessarily harassed unless you are going for a willful default, in which case we have some media coverage or some, what we say, judicial scrutiny. But otherwise, your information will be kept private. Grievance redressal is a key feature of the taxpayer charter, that how long will it take to solve your complaints, how long will it take to get your grievance sorted. So it is about responsive government. It is about responsive government, not just a passive government. So it is a two-way process. It's a two-way process. It's not just about one-way process. Then also the tax department will make sure that you have adequate information through emails, SMS campaigns, to maintain records, to pay taxes on time. You're reminded of the fact. So it is not unnecessary penalty. You're not supposed to, so that you don't get bogged down by unnecessary penalties and litigation. So it is about taxpayer charter, so that you have the desired information for filing taxes, to make it much easier to help you simplify your life, to help the nation grow, to help tax collections grow, etc. Then coming to tax reforms which have been announced, it is all in the line of ease of doing business, and lastly, to facilitate ease of living. Right? So again, please read the attached article. It has details regarding today's class. Now, when it comes to basics of tax, one should be very clear what is the difference between sales tax, GST, and VAT. So for that, we have a simple solution where, or we can say sales tax, GST, and VAT. So please remember that what is the difference between VAT and GST? This is very important to understand. Now, first of all, VAT is about value added, and this is about destination based tax. Destination tax. Now suppose you have a case where you have Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So maybe you have raw material from here and finished product is there, right? So what happens? So if raw material and finished product is both here, so you will get input credit in VAT. Input credit in a VAT regime. But if this is in different state, no input credit. So please remember, because it is a different department. It's a different department. So because Karnataka and Tamil Nadu are two separate departments, the raw material from here, the information flow is blocked. In other ways, we have 30 departments, 30 states, no integration. No integration. But now we talk about that it's a one nation, one tax. So what does one nation, one tax means? That all this line, what we call this line is no longer sacrosanct, where we say that this line is an artificial line under GST. But what are the issues with GST? What are the issues with GST as a tax reform? The problem is of GST compensation. GST compensation. So what is the compensation problem? that states are promised a growth of 14% in their revenue neutral rate. See, first of all, we need to understand what do you mean by this RNR. RNR is nothing but revenue neutral rate. That is after states shifted from VAT to GST. They were promised revenue neutrality, and plus they were promised an additional 14% assurity by the center in tax revenue in return for transferring all the financial powers, all the tax powers to the GST Council. Now, when we come to coronavirus, what is the problem? The center plus state, or what we say CGST plus SGST itself, has fallen way short of the desired collection level. Plus the cess collected in order to comply with the compensation criteria. The cess collected in order to comply with the compensation criteria is also not enough to cover for the 14% shortfall in central revenue or the state revenue. So the center is unable to fulfill its demand of vertical devolution. So this word is very important. The problem of center to state. See, what we have is, we have Finance Commission clearly state that there is a vertical devolution and there is a horizontal form devolution. That is, how much money should center give to states and how much should each state get. That is based on the Finance Commission formula. Finance Commission formula, for example, now we have what we say 15th Finance Commission will give a specific formula for division of tax revenue between different states. Now the problem is issue of compensation. So now the center has proposed two approaches where the states can either meet the shortfall from the cess itself, that is they have to just pay their interest rate, that is borrow 97,000 crores, or the central government will facilitate borrowing of 2,35,000 crores from the RBI. So the states are at loggerheads because many of the states are finding that both the options are unviable because of coronavirus. Plus they are constrained by the growing expenditure requirement for healthcare purposes. So it becomes a double whammy. So what is the issue with borrowing? The issue with borrowing is that the central borrowing cost is up to 50 basis, sometimes 50 basis points, that is 0.5%, to 2%. That is, center will be favorable to states in terms of 2% interest rate. See, when you calculate 2% over a large amount, so 2% over 1 lakh crore is roughly 2,000 crores. So it's a huge amount. Plus, it is about the promise what the center has made to the states. So it is about the constitutional factor, it's about the cost factor, it is about the liability factor, it is about FRBM. So a host of issues are involved in deciding what should be the appropriate formula for adequately compensating the states. But if you look at the principles of natural justice, if you look at the principles of constitution, law, legality behind the issue, it is a duty of the center to compensate the states. So where the center says that, okay, we accept that it is our duty, but the problem is that the whole issue is about act of God, where the finance minister has labeled it as an act of God. Why? Because coronavirus, they are claiming, is an act of God. So in one sense, you can say this is a true picture because nobody expected the GDP to fall drastically by 23%. We never expected tax revenue to fall short so bad. But the issue is it becomes morally obligated on the center to help the states in these difficult times. So now, what is the duty of the Finance Commission? Finance Commission itself is a body which can solve the dispute between center and state, because ideologically, both are having valid points, both are having points which are against each other. So it is not about whether state is better or center is better. It is about both are having their own constraints, both are having its own problems. However, what the plus point is that the RBI has adequate gunpowder to solve the crisis. That is, in the words of what we say Shaktikanta Das, that the RBI has kept its powder dry. It has the capacity to lower interest rates. It has a capacity to offer more and more money to the center or the states. The issue is who should take up this responsibility. So the whole issue will be taken up by the Finance Commission shortly, and it will make appropriate recommendations regarding the division of compensation, division of tax revenue, what should be the adequate R&R rate, what that is revenue neutral rate, should 14%, is 14% still a viability gap funding which is required for the states? Can the cess be extended for more than 5 years? So all these issues are at the fore. But however, when we come to UPSC prelims, one should be aware of the fact what is R&R. One should focus more on the basic concepts. So one should focus more on the basic concepts here. Why basics? Because whatever the solution is, that may be asked in prelims or mains, not as a ideological picture of what the solution is, because probably October 4th is your exam. So one should not get bogged down but that what is the solution. One should focus upon what are the basics, what is R&R, what is compensation, what are the rules governing compensation cess, how much can state withdraw from the compensation cess, how much can center withdraw. As we know that recently there was an amendment where the center and states were allowed to borrow or withdraw from the compensation cess. So that has also become a bone of contention, where the center has shied away from the responsibility of covering their FRBM targets using the cess money. That is, the excess funds from the compensation fund were withdrawn by the center. It was changed from 5-year basis to 1-year basis. So this is also an issue of contention. So one should be aware about the basic concepts in the GST. What is GST? What are the issues in center-state distribution? What are concepts like destination-based tax? What are the amendments in GST compensation cess? Till when is a cess valid? So all these are issues which one should be thoroughly clear of in order to solve questions in prelims. Thank you.